So in this session, we're going to have a look at the if function. And for any of you who joined us previously, you will recognize WYSIWYDGETs. At the end of the session, I will be dropping in the handouts and the files that I've been using today, along with the feedback form. Really useful if you can let us know what you'd like to cover in future sessions and what you thought of this one. So, WYSIWYDGETs. I have here my expenditure for the first, second and third quarters. My income, I've calculated total expenditure, total income, my gross profit. I've calculated the tax based on the 22% rate up here, and therefore my net profit. So I've got people who gave me money to invest into WYSIWYDGETs, and I promised to give them some money back. So the dividend amount is set at £10,000. So I want to know whether I'm going to be paying people from my net profit in the first, second and third quarters. Now I've only got 3 values and I can work out whether I'm paying them a dividend or not. But imagine you've got lots of different values that you need to check to see whether it meets that threshold criteria. And that's where the if function comes in useful. It's probably the most useful function in Excel because it allows you to test something, do one thing if that test is met and another if it's not. You often hear it referred to as the if, then, else. If it meets this condition, then do this, else do that. So we start with the equals as always, and if we're using a function, type in the name of the function. You'll see when I type if, there are other if functions, if error, if NA, ifs. So we're only looking at the if today. Open the brackets and I get my tooltips. So we've got logical test, value if true, value if false. My logical test is what I am checking for. So what do I want to know to decide whether to put a yes or a no in this cell? I want to know if the dividend is being paid. So I need to look at my net profit to see if it is greater than or equal to my dividend threshold. And I'm going to click the F4 button to fix that reference because when I copy it, I don't want it to move out of this cell. So that's my logical test. Is the value in B18 greater than or equal to my threshold, which is in I2? Comma moves me to the value if true. In other words, what do I want to put in that cell if that test comes back as being true? And I want to answer the question, pay dividend. So it's going to be yes. To put text in, I use the double quotes, type the text and close the double quotes. Comma moves me on to what to put in there if it's not met. So if we've not met the £10,000 threshold, we aren't going to be paying a dividend. So I'm going to put the text no in there. And that's the end of my if function. Close the brackets, press enter. I can click back on it, grab the fill handle and copy it across. As expected, it says yes, no, yes. Don't have to use text. So if we're going to be paying 1% of our net profit, if we meet the threshold, I'm going to do another if, equals if, open brackets. The test is exactly the same. Is the net profit greater than or equal to my threshold? Fixing the cell reference. If it is, then what I want to do is give them 1% of the net profit. So it's net profit multiplied by 1%, fixing the cell reference. If not, I'm going to be paying them 0, nothing. Close the brackets. Now, the reason I have my threshold and dividend amounts separately is because I would probably have these on a front sheet and I would update them year on year so it's the right amounts. I might pay them less. I might change the threshold. This allows me to change it in one place and everything automatically updates. So I would be paying 132.60, nothing, and 218.14. And that's the basis of the if function. We do the logical test, which is what you would need to check if you were going to answer that question. Is the net profit greater than or equal to the dividend threshold? And that's all the logical test is. what you would check if you were going to answer that question directly. Then we have the value if true. What do I put in the cell if that condition is met? In this case, it was the amount of the dividend. In the previous example, it was just some text. And then what to do if that threshold, that condition isn't met. So let's have another look at the if function. So exam scores. I've got first name and surname. I've got their score. I need to say whether they have passed or failed. And it tells me that they must score over 70 to pass the exam. So I'm going to start with equals and use the if function. Opening the brackets, I'm checking the exam score to see if it is greater than 70. And in this case, I'm just typing the value in. I need to remember that if I change my pass threshold, I have to come in and I have to change that number and copy it to the rest of the cells. If they have passed, I'm putting text in. So it's double quotes, type the text, close the double quotes. If not, then I'm going to put the word fail in. Closing my brackets, pressing enter and copying it down. For those of you that joined us for the number formatting, you would have seen that there are alternative ways of doing that using the number formatting options. But this is a different way of doing it. And it allows me to do something different depending on whether a criteria has been met or not. We can also nest functions. So again, I've got my exam scores here, and you may have seen this previously. What I want to know is whether they've passed or failed. But this time they've sat 3 separate tests, and I want to award a pass only if their average mark is equal to or more than the pass mark, which in this case is 65. So I've created the averages here, and now I can use the if equals if their average score is greater than or equal to the pass mark up here, which because it's separate, I need to fix the cell reference. If it is, I'm going to put in pass. If not, I'll put in the word fail. Close the brackets and enter and copy it down. Now that's all right, but I've got this extra column here that calculates the average score. And I don't really want to have an extra column. So what I'm going to do is in my if, instead of referring to E4, which is where I've calculated the average, I'm going to replace it with that function that's calculating the average. So I'm going to get rid of E4, and I want the average, open brackets, of the 3 tests, close brackets. So if the average of those 3 values is greater than or equal to D1, then it's a pass, otherwise it's a fail. So average is a function that you've probably used before. All I'm doing is I'm getting rid of the need to put that into this cell here, and instead I'm including it in this one here. If I copy that down, gives me the same results, but I can now remove that column. I don't need it anymore because the average is built into this if function. And that's what we mean by nested functions, one function that sits inside another function. So in this case, we're using the average function inside my logical test. And there are lots of functions that you can nest. For example, if they had to pass every single one of these tests, instead of doing the average, I would use the AND function. So AND checks multiple conditions, and if they're all true, it returns the value true. If any single one is false, then it will return the value false. So if this is greater than D1, comma, next one, this one is greater than or equal to D1, fixed reference, comma, this one is greater than or equal to, helps if I can type the greater than, or equal to D1 and fix the reference. Closing the brackets finishes my AND function. And if I click inside the AND open brackets, I can see that's my first logical test, that's my second one, and that's my third one. And because it's AND, only if all three come back as true will it allow me to go to the true value of my if. So the value if true. Press enter, copy that down, and I will have a lot less passes. I've only got the first two. Everyone else has failed at least one of the tests. And if I wanted to be generous, I could change that to an or. So as long as they passed any one of the tests, it will return true. So if that one or this one or this one is true, above the 65 pass mark, it will return the true value. And I've got a lot more passes. I'm just going to undo some of that and go back to my average. Because some of you may have noticed when I did my average to check whether it's greater than or equal to 65, we have a student at the bottom who has an average score of 65 and it's come back as fail. At which point I need to think about what my average actually is. So I've got three values. I'm adding them together and dividing by 3 to get my average. And if you are on the number formatting course, you will realize that what I've done is I've removed the decimal places. So if I add some decimal places in, you will see that they did not reach the 65. So it is actually 64.67. Seems a little mean, but we have a threshold for a reason. And although it showed 65 on my average score, they actually failed the test. So that's the if function. Lots of different things that we can do with it. And on my formulas ribbon, you will find the if under my logical references, along with the other ifs that are available. And if you want to start exploring what other things do, hover over it and it will give you a description of them. So that's if. We're now going to look at conditional formatting. Now, conditional formatting is effectively an if. But instead of using a function and calculating values and putting something different in, the conditional formatting will allow us to change the way a cell looks and feels based on its value. So if it meets the condition that you give it, then it will format it in a different way. And I'm going to go right back to my exam scores, because what I want to do is I want to format this so that it shows me as green if it's a pass and red if it's a fail. And there are different ways of doing that. So we'll start by looking at the most simple way, which is selecting the cells I want to change the format of. On my home ribbon, conditional formatting, and then highlight cell rules. And there are lots of different ways of doing this. We're going to start with text that contains. So what I'm saying is if the cell contains this text, and in this case, I'm going to do pass. You can see it already highlights those because it's got a predefined color. I can change that by clicking on the drop down and going to customized format. So I've got number formatting. I've got my font formatting. I can change borders. The one I'm going to use is the fill color, and I'm going to fill it with a nice green color, maybe not quite that bright, and click OK. That's my conditional formatting. If those cells contain the text pass, then turn them green. I now want to add a second condition. So again, conditional formatting, highlight cell rules, text that contains, and this time I'm going to go with fail. Again, I'm going to custom format and I'm going to use the red. So I've now got my formatting. If I change that to pass, it turns green. If it goes back to fail, it turns red. To view conditional formatting that you've already got on a worksheet, go to conditional formatting and manage rules. Now you'll see that there are no rules shown here because I'm showing rules for the current selection, and that's a cell down here that's got no formatting on it. If I go to this worksheet, I can see the two rules that I created. On the right hand side, it tells me what cells this formatting applies to. So D2 to D9 is this section of cells here. If I want to see the rule, I can select it and I can go to Edit Rule. And here I can see that we've got a format for specific text containing fail. And that's my format. If I want to change it, I can go into my formatting and change it in here, or I can change the requirements here. So specific text, containing, not containing, beginning with, ending with. And there are lots of different ways that you can tweak the formatting options that are created. I'm going to close that and come out of it, because we can also do it on the exam score. If I highlight the cells, highlight cell rules, greater than, less than, between, equal to. So I could do a greater than for pass and a less than for fail. All of these options are available as a single selection from here, and then you can go to tweak them by going into the rules and managing the rules. There are other options. So I've got my top and bottom, anything above or below average, the top 10 items and the bottom 10 items, the top 10% and the bottom 10%. So we've got lots of ways that we can create these conditional formatting rules. Once you get more familiar with it, we can go to Manage Rules directly or New Rules to create a new rule. So in here, I've got those options that I saw on the drop down, top and bottom, cells that contain, values that are above or below average, with unique or duplicate values, quite a useful one if you want to highlight the duplicate values and you don't want to just delete them like we can do with the data tab. And the one I use more frequently is use a formula to determine which cells to format. The reason I tend to use this is because in here I can create my own formulas. So I can use all of the functions to test conditions. If I wanted to test the average, then I can use the average formula in here. So I'm going to show you one of the reasons that we might want to use a formula to determine which cells to format. So at the moment, I've got these rules in here and I'm going to remove them. Clear rules from selected cells. That gets rid of all of my existing rules, because I don't want to just highlight this cell. If I've got a big spreadsheet, that might be way over on the right hand side where I can't see it. What I want to do is I want to highlight the entire row with the colour based on the pass or fail. To do that, I'm going to select the entire table, and we need to look at column D and then format the whole of the row. So conditional formatting, a new rule using a formula. Now what Excel does is with this selection that you've made, it starts at the top left corner and then it moves along formatting each cell and testing it against your condition, the if you like, before it moves to the next row and does the same thing. So I want to say if the first cell it tests is equal to, and then I want to put in the cell reference that I want to look at. So D2. Notice it automatically puts in the dollar signs. That means that when it moves to the next row or the next column, these won't change. And this is where I need to understand mixed referencing, because I want it to always look at column D, but I want it to be able to move between the different rows. So I'm going to take out the dollar sign that it put in front of 2. So it will always check column D, but it will check each row as it moves through them. So if $D2 equals fail, inside double quotes because it's text, and if that is true, then I want to format it with my red colour. And I'm going to click OK, and it should now highlight the entire row with the red colour based only on the value in cell D. So whereas these are all based on the data in the cell it's checking, using new rules, you can create your own rules that will do what you want them to. So I'm going to create another new rule to do the pass formatting. So we use a formula. It's already got the if because conditional formatting is all about if it meets a condition. So I just need to put in the equals. Again, the first cell that I want to check is D2, and I want it to be able to move out of the row, so I take the dollar out from the 2. Equals pass, and then I can set my format, and I can use my green color, click OK, and it now formats the entire row in the color that I've selected. Conditional formatting is a very powerful tool. It does mean that you can highlight trends or items that you're interested in without you having to go and check individual cells. It can do other things as well. So let's take this example here where I've got 3 tests and they've got different values for different students. If I select these 3, I'm looking at the value in individual cells to begin with. So I can use the individual highlight cell rules, anything that is greater than, and in this case my pass mark is 65, and I want to fill that with, I'll just use the green fill. Now notice that that's greater than, and I want it greater than or equal to, because I've got some here that might meet that criteria. So I need to go back into my rules. I need to go and edit that rule. And on my drop down, I can then change it to greater than or equal to, rather than it just being that greater than option that I can see on here. The same thing with my less than. So less than 65, I don't need the or equals to, because that would be a pass. And I can fill it with red. So now I've got a really quick way of just looking at that and seeing passes and fails. It also makes it easier to check my conditions that I've added at the end. I can also do what we call a heat map. So if I take away these rules, I've got the same selection of these scores, conditional formatting, and I'm going to go to color scales. What I want to do is apply different colors depending on the values in the cell. So I'm going to go for my green, yellow, red color scale. And what it does is it finds the highest and lowest values in the cells you've got selected. So my lowest is 34, my highest is 100. Because I went from red to green, my lowest value is the red, my highest value is the green, and then it gradients the colours between those two based on the values. So the closer it is to 100, the more green it will be. So 78 is quite a pale greeny yellow. In the middle, we've got the 65s, 67s, that are yellow. And at the bottom end, we've got the reds, the 34s and the 39s. So I can do that to create myself a heat map. Other things I can do, if I select these, go to conditional formatting, we have data bars. That allows you to fill the cell based on its value. So if I select a data bar, it will fill it according to the value in the cell. So the highest is 91, and that pretty much fills the cell. The lowest is 46, so that only half fills my cell. There are other options. We've got icons that you can use as well. So we've got icon sets that will tell you whether it's up, down, left and right, and different colors. And if I go to more rules, I can come back into here and I can change that. So I can change the icon styles, I can reverse the order, I can get rid of the value and just show the icon, and I can change the areas. So automatically it will do it at the splits. So I've got 33 and 67, but I could do this at 75% and 50% if that's what I wanted to do. And I can change that based on the conditions that I've set for that option. And that's pretty much it for Excel for if and conditional formatting. However, what I'm going to do now is to just pop into the invoices that I started on previously, and I'm going to start updating my invoices. So this is a file that I started working on a few webinars ago, and I've been building it up. So we've used number formatting to put the leading zeros in. We've used some common functions to do the calculations. And now what I want to do is I want to fill out the discount. So what I'm saying is if they've bought more than 5 of an item, then we're going to put a 10% discount against the price. Otherwise, there's no discount. So my if equals if, open brackets. My check is to see whether the quantity entered is greater than 5. If it is, then I want to give them 10%, which is this cell here. It's always going to be that cell, so I fix my reference, multiplied by the price before the discount. If not, the discount value will be 0. It's really important to try and keep your value if true and value if false data types the same. I wouldn't want to be putting text in here that said no discount, because when I calculate the total price, I'm going to be using multiplication and I don't want text in there. So trying to keep those two values the same. So no discount because there's no quantity. If I put 5 in, it doesn't give me a discount. But as soon as I enter 6, it gives me a discount. Now the discount is coming out as a percentage, so I'm just going to reformat that to currency. So I can now copy that down, and it's gone too far. Little tip here, when I copy it down, it copies everything. So it copies the formula, but it also copies the formatting. If you don't want the formatting to be copied, so I'll lose my little black border at the bottom, this little box that pops up, I can click on it and I can say fill without formatting. So what that means is I retain my border at the bottom. Now the other thing is, what I would like to do is not display the 0% where there is no product selected, or maybe no quantity. I've cheated already on this one here. So what you will notice when I select these cells is that they are a custom number format. And if you are on the number formatting, you will know that there are 4 areas you can format: positive, negative, 0 values, and text. And all I've done is I've left the 0 values with nothing, which means it hides any 0 values on here. If I change these back to a normal number format, they will all reappear. So on here, I want to do something similar, but I'm going to do that with another if. So I've got my first if, which calculates the discount. I'm going to nest that if inside an if that checks to see whether anything has been entered in the quantity. And if it hasn't, it's going to leave this cell empty. If it has, it will then do this if to check for the discount. So I'm going to click in my formula bar or double click in the cell, and I'm going to pretend this doesn't exist, because this is going to be part of my next if. So imagining that doesn't exist, we've got the equals. The first thing we do is the name of the function, which is if, and open brackets. Same as before, logical test. What am I checking? I'm checking the quantity to see if it's not empty. So to check for not empty, I can do the less than and greater than signs next to each other. That's not. And empty, I can check by using double quotes. So we're checking to see that there is nothing in there. Normally we use the double quotes to allow us to enter text. In this case, I'm checking to see if there's nothing in there. So if it is not empty, then I want to do this if, which checks to see whether they're entitled to a discount. So all I'm going to do is leave that exactly the way it is, click at the end and put a comma, because this becomes my value if true. My value if false is I want to leave that empty. So my logical test is there a quantity? If there is, then my logical test is is the quantity more than 5? If it is, give them a discount. If not, then they get nothing. But outside that, if there's nothing in the quantity, then I want to leave nothing in the cell. So 2 more double quotes gives me a blank cell. I can close the brackets, press enter, and when I copy this down, I need to fill without formatting. So that's tidied up this area here, because this area basically says there's nothing in the quantity, so we're not going to do a discount. If I put something in the quantity, it creates the discount for me. So obviously I forgot that I filled without formatting, so I need to format these as currency. But as you've probably seen, it now creates a new error. So this is an error in value, and it basically says I'm trying to multiply or subtract or add one value by something that is not a value. So hash value tells me that the calculation I'm doing is using a cell with no value in. I've set it to being blank. So although originally my number formatting did what I needed it to in here, it doesn't work when I start getting rid of values. So I would need to do the same thing here. That's the calculation I want. It works fine. If there's a quantity, it works out a discount and puts a value in. But if there is no quantity, there's no value. So again, I'm going to do an if, open brackets. Again, I may be checking the quantity, or I could check whether there's a product code. If there's no product code, then there's not going to be quantity. Entirely up to you which way you want to do it. I'd go with the product code. If the product code is empty, wrong key. So this time I'm not doing not empty, I'm doing empty. Then leave it empty. Otherwise, do my calculation. Close the brackets. I can copy that down and all of my value errors in that column will disappear, apart from that one. That's because I've got a product code but no quantity. As soon as I put the quantity in, that will disappear as well. And then I'd need to do the same on total price. So I click after the equals to put in the if, open brackets. If the quantity is empty, comma, leave it empty. Otherwise, do my calculation. Close the brackets, copy it down without the formatting, and I've now got something that looks absolutely fine. As soon as I put product code and quantity in, it does all the calculations. If we don't have a product code in the row or a quantity, it doesn't do the calculations. So it's a really good way of being able to hide things if they're not applicable, particularly if you're then going to be printing this out and sending it somewhere. Also on my invoice, I have a list of my products and stock levels. What I want to do is I want to highlight any row where my stock level has fallen below half. So in here, I'm going to select all of my data, and then I'm going to add my conditional formatting. Because I want to apply it to more than just what's in the cell, I need to create a new rule. If this was all just based on the individual cell values, I could use the standard highlight cell rules. But I need to create a new rule and write my own formula. We always start with equals and then we tell it what cell we're looking at. So in this case, I want to see the stock level. Again, I'm highlighting the row. I need it to change row numbers so I can take the $ out. We're always looking at the stock level, so I need the $ in front of F because I don't want it, when it moves to B4, I don't want it moving across from F into G. There's nothing in there. So if F4 equals 10. That's my check or my condition. I could say if it was less than 10, more than 10, less than 50% of some value I've put somewhere, less than or equal to. I can use whatever conditions I want, and then I can set my formatting and I can highlight it in whatever color I see fit. So now what I'm going to find out is if my stock level drops, it will start highlighting things I need to think about ordering. In future webinars, we will actually look at how we can automatically update the stock level based on what's been placed on our invoice. And if necessary, we can also automate the restocking and send emails out. So this is my invoicing system. We're getting there. We're not quite there yet. What I want to do is create an invoicing system that will automatically add in any orders. It will automatically add in my new ordering, my restocking, and keep a list of the orders that have been placed. But for now, we've got our conditions in that make our front page look acceptable. We've not got lots of zeros all over the place. We've got no errors in the data. And when we come to the products, we've got something that will highlight when I need to reorder stock because it drops below 10.